believe that in the last couple of weeks, Venerable has been inspiring you all with her Sutta discussions in my absence, and today you have all of us. So that doesn't mean that only we want to give our perspective. We also invite everybody. This is called a Sutta discussion group. So it's really about bringing these to life in a way that's meaningful for you, and actually seeing how we might apply some of these teachings to our own struggles, our own inspiration, or whatever it is that can be applied to your practice. And someone very kindly wrote the page that we're on for those who are new. Please don't worry if you don't have the book. We'll be reading it out, and it's not so much an intellectual study, as I say. It's more a practical kind of discussion about what these suttas might mean for us and how they can help us in our lives. So we'll just begin. And usually I start reading probably part of it and then open for any questions. And you can either raise your virtual hand, which is under the participants button, or you might have a separate virtual hand button, and we'll unmute you. So we are recording, but when you're unmuted, only your voice will be recorded. The video will stay on us. But if you prefer, you can ask it in the chat box if you prefer not to have your voice on recording. But people do love to hear from different people. It makes it a lot more accessible and alive. So I'll begin. It's page 131, and this is from the Digha Nikaya number 21. And it's a new chapter this week. Last week it was finishing off the intentional community. And this week it's disputes. It's interesting, isn't it, that we start off with an intentional community and then we move on to disputes. What do they call it? Forming, storming, or storming, forming, and something else anyway. Norming or something. So this is the storming phase now. We can read about what come up for us. So, is the sound okay for everybody, first of all? Yeah, great. All right, here we go. Why do beings live in hate? Which is a strong word, but of course that is taken to mean here any kind of aversion, irritation, frustration, dispute. Sakka, ruler of the Devas, asked the Blessed One, beings wish to live without hate, hostility, or enmity. They wish to live in peace. Yet they live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and as enemies. By what fetters are they bound, sir, that they live in such a way? And the Blessed One said, ruler of the Devas, it's the bonds of envy and miserliness that bind beings, so that although they wish to live without hate, hostility, or enmity, and to live in peace, yet they live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and as enemies. Sakka, delighted, exclaimed, so it is, Blessed One, so it is, Fortunate One. Through the Blessed One's answer, I've overcome my doubt and gotten rid of uncertainty. Then Sakka, having expressed his appreciation, asked another question. But what, sir, gives rise to envy and miserliness? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? When what is present do they arise? And when what is absent do they not arise? So it's interesting here, isn't it, that we're digging back into the sequence of causality, which is very, it's a standard kind of framework that's used across the Buddhist text and across the Dhamma, that we always have to look back. What caused this to arise and what caused that to arise, that gave rise to this. So I find this very nice that we're kind of looking for the cause of things and not stopping at the apparent result. So he says here, envy and miserliness arise from liking and disliking. This is their origin. This is how they are born and how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. So if there's no liking or disliking, Can't be any envy or miserliness. That's interesting. But what, sir, gives rise to liking and disliking? They arise from desire. So here it's skipping a bit, which is a bit of a shame, actually. Maybe I'll read the whole sentence. They arise from desire. This is their origin. This is how they are born. This is how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. And what gives rise to desire? What gives rise to desire? What is their origin? How is desire, in this case, born? And how does desire arise? When what is present, does desire arise? And when what is absent, does it not arise? Desire arises from liking and... desire arises from liking and disliking.
No, from thinking.
Oh, yes, it arises from thinking. Okay. That is its origin, that is how it's born, and that is how it arises. When thinking is present, desire arises, but when thinking is absent, it does not arise. My goodness, is that the whole of the teaching, to overcome thinking? But sir, what gives rise to thinking? What is its origin? How is it born? And how does thinking arise? When what is present, does thinking arise? And when what is absent, does it not arise? Thinking, ruler of the devas, arises from elaborated perceptions and notions. Is that sometimes talked about as conceivings, isn't it? Perceptions and conceivings, I think, as well. When elaborated perceptions and notions are present, thinking arises. When elaborated perceptions and notions are absent, thinking does not arise. Wow.
Wow.
So this is quite a rich and lesser known sequence of dependent origination, and one of the sequences, because of course we have desire or wanting, greed in the dependent origination as well. And in there, it's a little bit more, it's looking more existential arising of these things. So the prelude to desire in that case is Vedana, as feelings, giving rise to craving and then clinging. And before feelings is like the whole, the contact between the objects of the senses and the sense bases. So obviously that's talking at a kind of deeper level in a sense, but this gives another kind of pathway into how desires can at least be, can be increased, right? How desire can arise. So it can come from thinking, right? When the mind thinks of nothing, oh look, we missed that bit. When the mind thinks of nothing, desire does not arise. Okay, so desire does not arise when the mind thinks of nothing. But I don't think this means desire is not there. So perhaps it's talking about the immediate arising of these things. So anyway, this is... okay, so Shirley's confused. Yeah, so...
Could you read the sequence through just
yeah, I can read it through again without all the repetition. So we started off here with the bonds of envy and miserliness that binds beings, so that although they wish to live without hate, hostility, or enmity, and to live in peace, yet they live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and as enemies. So then Sakka asked the Buddha, what gives rise to envy and miserliness? And the Buddha says they arise from liking and disliking. But what gives rise to liking and disliking? Liking and disliking arise from desire. What gives rise to desire? Desire arises from thinking. When the mind thinks about something, desire arises. When the mind thinks of nothing, it does not arise. And then he asked, but what, sir, gives rise to thinking? Thinking, ruler of the devas, arises from elaborated perceptions and notions or conceivings. When elaborated perceptions and notions are present, thinking arises. When elaborated perceptions and notions are absent, thinking does not arise. Okay. So, in a sense, if you look at it backwards, we're saying that elaborated perceptions and notions are the cause of all the other things here. So elaborated perceptions and notions give rise to thoughts, which give rise to desire, which give rise to liking and disliking, and which give rise to envy and miserliness. So this is one sequence. It's not the only sequence. And I think this is where sometimes confusion can arise. It doesn't mean that there aren't other ways it could go. But in this particular one, we're talking about how these things lead to beings living in hate and harming each other, hostile and as enemies, with jealousy and miserliness. So this is the social and communal harmony topic, and this is our main interest here, how to live in harmony. So I think that's quite interesting, that the whole sequence toward disharmony starts with elaborated perceptions and notions. And I think, yeah, all of us are sort of laughing a little, because in community, and I'm sure this stands for your communities too, whether your workplace or family or any society that you're part of, certainly in monasteries, one of the most difficult things living in community is the kind of projections and misunderstandings, misinterpretations, presumptions that can arise, you know, because we live with people who have different conditioning to us, often very, very different backgrounds, from different cultures, different ages, and maybe even coming to the monastic life for different reasons too. So naively, in the beginning of my monastic life, I thought that, oh great, I'm going to have all these friends that are just like me. They've all come because they meditate, they want to practice this method, and they want to, you know, realize the Dhamma. They're a certain type of character. And then, you know, especially when I entered communities that were not based on meditation alone, I realized that people are very, very different. And you're all put into that community together, like it or lump it. And you have to kind of learn to live and learn from it. And one of the most dangerous things to harmony, I think, is just getting an idea in your head about somebody and where they're coming from and what they meant by what they said. That's could be completely off course, you know. Could be completely off course, because what do we really know about another person? Actually, nothing. Most of the time, we're reacting to how we feel when something's said or someone does something. It's like there's a feeling that happens right in the body. That's the contact that gives rise to feeling. And we don't like that feeling, or we maybe like that feeling, and then they're a wonderful person. Right? Oh, yeah.
That sutta goes on, interestingly enough, about what is the correct, what are thoughts that, what thoughts should you have, how do you think, how should you, you know, what are the correct elaborated perceptions and formations. So that's an interesting question, you know.
Right.
We do have perceptions, but which one is right? And this is actually something that goes, I mean, in community, everybody thinks they're right.
I mean, I think by default, human beings think they're right, because you don't think thoughts that you think are wrong, right? Whatever you think it's right. I mean, we don't intentionally.
Yeah, and they're all good people. They're all good people in monasteries, and everybody's very high-minded, and everybody's right. I struggle a lot with this, because you know, there are many ways to run a monastery, and there's many ways to live, to run a monastery. So what is the right way to run a monastery? But interesting, what the sutta does say is that what leads to wholesome states of mind leads to nibbana, and leads away from greed, hatred, and delusion. That is what is right. What
exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
that is what is right thought.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think this idea of elaborated perceptions and notions, I mean, the problem with that is the elaboration, right? The bit we add on. I guess I'm not sure if the word's prapancha or not yet.
It is, prapancha sanya sankhara.
Right, yeah. So sankharas is more like reactivity, or it's what we create, it's what we fabricate. And prapancha is like a wonderful word because it sounds like the meaning, which is just proliferating and building things up, kind of spinning off further and further away from reality. And I guess that's one of the troubles with thinking, it's arising after something's happened, and it's what we put onto it. Like this evening, I mean, this isn't really on topic, but it's interesting when we ask one another in community, so how did you come to the Dhamma? And everyone thinks for a while, and then they make a story about how they came to the Dhamma. And I do it all the time. And then I realize all I'm doing is kind of overlaying something that happened a long time ago, which was a process, with a kind of intellectual conception, which is actually probably not at all what happened.
You remember the good bits and the bad bits?
Yeah. And there's certain bits you keep remembering and become the prominent bit. Whereas actually there were probably loads and loads of other bits.
Right. And you ask somebody else, and they have a completely different version. What happened?
Right. Yeah. So it's quite interesting because I think this is sort of showing us the danger, really, in allowing our thoughts to run wild.
Not even one wild, just to believe them. I mean, for me, I initially thought, because I thought it must be true. We almost taught that in school, if it feels right, you analyzed it correctly, and it
you
must
get
be
a star.
right. It's
you get a gold star.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then you've got something, right? People feel that when they've thought about something well, then they've got somewhere, but really you haven't got very far. I'm going to come to the chat just because we do have a few questions coming in, and we're getting all very excited over here, fully displaying exactly what the Sutta is about. And we'll come to the chat, and then we can perhaps bring in Aya a little bit as well. I want you not to fall off the edge of the screen. There we go. Right. I'm confused, Shirley says. Independent origination, doesn't desire arise from liking and disliking? Vedana. Well, Vedana is more classified as affective feeling tone, you could say, or affective tone of experience. So it's kind of experience that's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, but it's not the actual liking or disliking of it. It's the actual feeling itself. The liking or disliking to me would be more like sankhara, be more like the reaction to it. That would be the desire, basically, because you either want it or you don't want it, and both are desire, right? Both are kind of whether you want or don't want something, it's a reactivity.
Yes, and I think the Buddha has different ways of, depending on who he's speaking to, relating to that person at that time. In this case, Sakka.
So I mean, he's not giving the teaching on dependent origination. He's giving a teaching on what can lead to envy and miserliness as a cause for dispute. So it's a different sequence. But I think maybe the liking and disliking part was confused for Vedana. I mean, naturally we're primed, isn't it, to kind of move in toward pleasant feeling and move away, pull away, or avert ourselves from unpleasant feeling. But part of the practice is to learn to see that all feeling is impermanent and is not self, and is ultimately not really worth getting too worked up about. And staying cool in the midst of pleasant and unpleasant. I don't understand what's meant by elaborated notions and perceptions. Do you want to speak to that?
I can say a little bit. It's very interesting. I like the way it's phrased, actually. I think it's something we do all the time without noticing. So
can you hear okay?
We were speaking earlier about relationships, how it seems like, like two people meet and they have a conversation, and they, you know, I meet, say, I Upeka, and then I have an idea of who she is, what she's like. She meets me, it's the same thing, and then actually there'll be some truth in it, and then there'll be some elaboration. There'll be some, there'll be certain things that I'll maybe fill in the gaps, and she'll fill in the gaps, and then if you live with somebody, you know, you're with them a lot, then there'll be certain patterns that are created between you together that, you know, arise often from old habits and or old conditioning, and they're not necessarily, you know, how one perceives what's going on isn't necessarily what's actually going on often. So what you might feel, gosh, they're making me really stressed by being so strict or so anxious, whatever it is, and then we sort of overlay, we create, we elaborate on what's going on, and then we have our old perceptions from the past. So when I was growing up and my father did that, this thing happened, and so she's doing that now, and this thing's going to happen. So it all gets sort of tangled together, the old patterning and perceptions, and then what's actually happening in the present. So often there's a sort of a lot of overlay in the present on what's actually happening. And this sutta is kind of bringing it back to something very, very simple, of just kind of just being. Actually, that's what it's bringing it back to, just being, experiencing, receiving, without adding on top of like, I like it, I don't like it, I'm afraid, I want, you know, all of that overlay is just saying, just be with it as it is.
Right. When you said overlay, I think that relates to projection as well.
Projection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm never quite sure how to explain. I don't know. How would you explain this?
I think it's connected with perception, isn't it? Because it's often related to things that we've known in the past.
In the past, yeah.
The way we've been conditioned in the past, culturally or in our family or through trauma, all of those things, they influence the way we experience life.
Right.
And then somebody comes into that, you know, somebody meets us, and then all of that comes in on top of the actual experience. Both ways.
Both ways, yeah. It's basically we get in a real tangle, and it becomes extremely hard to untangle, because we're moving away from direct experience. I think that's one way I understand it. You know, direct experience is what you know in this moment. It's not what you think about it. Ajahn Brahm always says thinking about is like literally means around something. You know, it's not thinking into it. You can't think into something. You can feel into something, but you can't think into it.
I think that works fine. It's a good point.
So, and it's interesting to see what Minori wrote, that here he's saying that elaborated notions and perceptions also refers to cravings, conceit and views, because I think this is another thing that can really lead to a lot of difficulty in community. If we feel that things should be a certain way, we have a view, you know, that I don't know, people should always be calm, and people should like give you a hug when you're upset, or, you know, that kind of thing. And then it doesn't happen, and we get so upset because we expect love to look one way, or we expect support to look one way, and someone else sees it differently. And the conceit as well. And that's important, because we have this sense of I am a such and such type of person. And if something happens that challenges your self-view, this is really where it gets interesting. You know, especially if you kind of pride yourself on being the one that pleases, and then suddenly someone's not very happy and it's your fault and you have to fix it, you have to fix them, you know, because that hurts your self-view. It's not really because it might be involved with caring for the person, but often what we do is protect our self-view at all costs, which is interesting. And that comes from conceit and view, doesn't it? Personality view.
And craving.
Craving as well. Wanting to be perceived a certain way. And we can't be, because people's perceptions change. Even if somebody perceives me as this kind, generous person, they might perceive me that way for about 5 minutes, and then they'll perceive me as something different, especially if I say no to something they want, isn't it? If you say yes to things people want, they say, oh, she's so kind. Because you're satisfying somebody's wants. But if you say no, I struggle because I find it hard sometimes to say no. And part of that is because I actually want to please people. And another part is because I feel it's not good to say no. Like I've been kind of conditioned by my parents to always say yes. So if I have to say, can somebody do something that I know they probably don't want to do, or I have to say no to something, that challenges my self-view, because then I don't feel like a good person, you know? I don't know. I mean, you might not know. But I think this is quite a deep conditioning for me. And I think maybe, I'm guessing, especially for women on the whole, that we're conditioned to really give a lot and please and keep the harmony and look out for everyone else. And yeah, I don't know. I think other people might relate to that perhaps. Yeah. Anyway, we're speaking a lot, and I'm just aware that there's still some comments I'd like to mention, but I'd also like to open up for hearing your voices, because that's when it gets more interactive. So I'll just see if I can go through these a little bit. Do you want to go for that?
Okay. I think contextualizing outcome, the disharmony and conflict dissolves the gaps or insufficiencies in the causal sequence. I was unconvinced until that question outcome was reiterated.
Yeah. I think so. Noticing that this sequence is basically all about one way that disharmony can occur. Yeah. It's not a full, complete description of reality and the only way thinking can arise or desire can arise, but it's a particular way that it can arise in relation to mindfulness, etc.
I think I see a lot of...
You want to read that one?
Okay. I think I see a lot of the thoughts that run through my head are causally conditioned by the stories, conversations, and media I'm exposed to and am drawn towards. This is why adverts and such can be quite influential, and why right speech is so important. Don't watch TV.
Absolutely, because right speech isn't only talking to each other, it's also what we talk to in social media, what we have into our head, because whenever you read an article, that's an article speaking to you, you know, whatever you watch on the movie, that movie's speaking to you. It's like having a person in the room. My dad used to get so irate when Donald Trump would be on the telly, you know, because I mean, my family are not that way inclined, which of course I'm happy to say because I must be right. But and I'd be like, why are you having him in your living room? 2 or 3 times every evening as the same newsreel comes around. You can't stand the person. You're getting red in the face and bitter and
shouting at the TV,
feeling that, you know, the whole world's just going wrong. And why do you have him in your living room? You know, why don't you play, I don't know, a talk? He did actually occasionally listen to a Dhamma talk. Yeah, so sometimes we think this won't have an effect, but it does. You start having the same emotions that you dislike in the other, right? The hatred, the bitterness. So I have to be very careful. Are elaborated perceptions and notions, craving, conceit, distorted views? Yeah, as per the footnote or reference. Yeah, they can definitely be related to that. I mean, I guess those things are sort of causes for elaborated perceptions. They're not equivalent to necessarily. Elaborated perceptions can come from ignorance, can come from all sorts of things, daydreaming, fantasizing. I mean, yeah, I guess distorted view in the sense that at that moment you're not aware of what you're doing and that it's harmful as well. Because part of right view is knowing what's harmful and what's not. Oh, Matisha's here. Yeah,
and I think part of what it's pointing to is it's fabricated.
Yeah,
that's also a really important piece. That when there's envy, when there's mindfulness, is coming from a fabricated misperception of reality.
Yeah, that's right.
It's essential.
Yes, yeah. So someone's asking about the Pali words. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this Sutta discussion to start going into the Pali and exploring the translation now, but certainly if you want to do that afterwards, it'd be great. Adrian's very great at finding the words quickly. Papancha Sanya Sankar is the word, which means basically what we said. It's like Sanya's perception, Sankar is like kind of fabrication. So perceiving in a fabricated way, like it's more and more embellished, and Papancha is that proliferation. So, but I really want to open up for people to talk about how these things affect their own lives. And, just as we've given some examples, and I'd love to hear more from you too, but also from the group about how this plays out for you, or anything you're struggling with that this could speak to.
Bill, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Hi, Bill.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
So
Yeah.
I'm living this, what you're talking about, in the present right now. Without getting into details, my son is heading down a path that is not good. And so when I first caught him, I lost it. Intense amount of anger and frustration. And I could see where those feelings came from. Part was a fear for a 13-year-old and where he's going and projecting into the future. And then part of it was my own ego. I could see, how could my son do this kind of thing? How could he be involved? Then perceptions of he was involved with another kid. And then I wanted to meet the parents, and not for any positive reason, but to kind of scold them. How could your son do this with my son? And all of it was about ego and fear of the future, my projection of where things were going, not just what he had done was severe enough, but on top of that, so much of it is about the future, about what this means, where it could go, how he could ruin his life if he continues down a certain path.
Yeah. That must be so stressful.
Which is why I'm not on the square today, which is great. What we're talking about speaks volumes to exactly where I am. I'm constantly bringing myself back, present moment. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I can't control his future.
Right.
I can only lay a path.
Yeah, wow.
Part of it's,
Sweet.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds very tough, because it's true what you say about you can't control it, you can't control the future of your children. It's true. And, you can do what you can, because it's like, it's not just about, okay, I'll just be present and just notice. There's also maybe things you are doing or can do that it will shake him up and wake him up. And, I think one has to try to do what one can also, but not then to get lost in proliferation of like, oh gosh, and then this will happen, then that will happen. Or, I think about that sutta where the Buddha is talking to a man with a baby on his lap. And then he says, if the baby starts choking, he's sucking, if the baby starts choking on a stone, would you just let him choke, or would you put your finger in the mouth and pull that stone out? And even if it would draw blood, you get in and pull it out. And that's what comes to mind when you're talking about your son, actually, is like, well, maybe there are some things you can do that are compassionate, that might help him. You can't just, who knows, his karma is his karma, but you might be able to help him to reflect or see the danger in what he's doing. It's possible.
Oh yeah, and we're as a parents, we're doing all that, and then the resistance to it, even though we're trying to do things to help, he takes it as a punishment.
Yeah. Maybe reiterating just how much you love him, and even if he doesn't take that on board, you will still be there.
That's good.
Yeah. And I'll stop. We went to Empty Cloud once, and we're going again. Good. And Arjan Medico sat with him, and I'm trying to make an appointment for my son related with him. Good. I want to set an appointment for him to meet with Arjan Medico again.
Fabulous.
To have another. Arjan said nothing I didn't already say, but when
Yeah.
it comes from a monastic,
Yeah. It goes the other
way.
way too. My parents listen to Ajahn Brahma, they don't tell me, they tell my sister. They wouldn't tell me. They wouldn't admit that they would do something that I would recommend. It's just like that. It's too much self-identification. You're doing a great job, Bill, really. Just see if you can catch
Thank
that mind when it starts to go into worst case scenario, because it's not going to go into that scenario. It could go into another one that's bad, but it can't get to what it's going to do. You know, you don't know. You've just got to be there with where you're at now as much as possible. But I feel for you because I have no idea how hard it must be, and I wouldn't. It's tough. It will change.
yeah, that it will, and relying on the Dharma and the teachings does help bring
Right.
a sense of peace.
Well done. Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
As well, because it's hard to come to these things when you're not feeling the best of moods, but it's good that you did. All right, can we come to Mukund?
Mukund, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Hello, Mukund.
Hello, good to see you again, Venerable, after a few weeks.
Yeah.
Bill, you just sparked a thought for me, and I found that, in some really tough personal situations, when it feels like I had a similar reaction, what's going to happen in the future, and the fear of it, and how do I solve for this? And I found that, I would find that I can think of so many things and, potential solutions, but I can't solve for them all. But the only thing I can solve for is myself. So in a sense, my approach was to say, okay, am I in the best possible state of mind, given whatever stresses and pressures and tension, to deal with something? And especially with children, I think that for me, that was very valuable, because often they really need us when they behave in a way like they really don't need us. and somewhere deep down inside, I think they know it, but they won't admit it. So yeah. Just a few thoughts.
It makes me wonder, when you said they know it but they won't admit it, it makes me have compassion and wonder whether they know they're really not doing good and they want to be doing better and they want to show you they can be doing better. That's why they don't want you to tell them. Maybe, I don't know. Ishq, it's so tough being a teenager. If your son is a teenager, I don't know. 13, yeah. So I was about to say the word. Okay, can you unmute me?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So lovely to see three of you there.
Yeah, I like
that
it.
explanation of the elaborated perceptions. That was really clear. That really resonated. And also what you were saying, Venerable Chandra, about I could relate exactly to what you were saying about wanting to please people. I've got like these two parts to me where sometimes, especially say at work, or there's certain things where I think it has to be this way. This is the right way. And then other times, but at the same time, I don't want to upset people.
Yeah.
So when they don't do it that way, I get annoyed, and then I think, oh, I've got to tell them now.
Yeah.
And then you have like this inner conflict, and then often I may even come across badly because I've got this inner conflict. So
Exactly.
I find it really hard, especially I think in work, because I think with work, well, work has to be this way because it's work, it's a business. But I've definitely got a lot better at it, or I believe I have. But those explanations of on the other thing is the fabrications. I like that. Like your thoughts are, and I've noticed that actually. I said something to so I worked with my brother something recently, and we've had some problems, not me and him, but taking the energy out of things. Like when I've had comments said to me, for example, and it was just ridiculous because actually those comments, I didn't do the thing that I was accused of, aimed at me.
Right.
And when I reflected afterwards and I didn't react, I thought, I'm going to wait. I got all you know, emotional. And then when I waited, I kind of laughed at it.
That's good.
Like, that wasn't even meant for me. That was ridiculous, you know. But
Yeah.
and everyone else has said, you know, that's, I can't control other people. I can only do my bit, and by reacting, that's going to make things worse. But yeah, I mean, still find things difficult, you know, and it's difficult. And actually, that just kind of leads on to what Bill was saying about. I think that's amazing that you've had that perception and mindfulness and that honesty with yourself. That's so hard. That is one of the hardest things. If you've already got that, then surely that can only help. And actually, the thing I think you said about love, I've seen in family that, you know, seen people that have been pulled out of friendship groups because they were going down a wrong route. I say wrong, you know, like people sort of getting into crime, and then potentially them not feeling, even though their parents were always there for them, that they're so loved. And I think if you just make it really clear, obviously I'm not at this stage of my parents. If you make it really clear that, you know, the love, and I guess that's metta, right? That's what we're all trying to do with it as well.
I think people need to hear it said.
Yeah,
I say almost every day that I'm grateful for the people I'm around, you know, because I mean, maybe it's because I need to hear it said to me, but I actually think people need to hear it said.
Yeah,
you know, even you said something to me the other day about Ajahn. You said, of course, he cares for you so much. And I'm like, oh, really? I mean, I kind of know it, but you're like, it's obvious. It's like, it's not obvious because I don't hear it. I mean, we don't hear these things, you know, and then we we're insecure. Beings are kind of fragile and insecure. And I think you can never say it too many times. Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes the person doesn't hear it. Like I know.
Yeah, it takes time.
They just don't hear it.
But it's even more reason to keep saying it.
Well, yeah.
Don't you think?
I don't know, like my brother, for example, always thought I wasn't close to him. Or his parents judged him or whatever, but they never did. And maybe they don't say, we don't judge you. But he just didn't hear it. He didn't hear it.
But now,
and now he does.
To go in
48.
It's a combination, isn't it? Actions and words, I guess, and maturity.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. I really admire all the parents in this room. And by the way, I just keep smiling because I'm seeing Annette and Grace there. And they're smiling when Sean's talking because these are all our ex-guests. And they're all together, look. They all come to visit each other. It's just joyful to see you. Hello. Love you. And Susie, of course. Were you there when she was there alongside Grace Joss? They just overlapped, right? Yeah. So nice. Anyway, hopefully more of you will come. Or you'll all come back at least. Okay. Is there anything else from the group? It'd be kind of interesting if anyone wishes to talk about the miserliness and envy part, because I guess that's something we don't always see in ourselves, and we don't want to kind of admit it in ourselves. But I find that interesting that that's the proximate cause for this hostility and enmity and harming one another, that it's this envy and miserliness. Because I guess enmity in a way is the opposite. Enmity, right? Does it say enmity or envy? I read envy before.
Envy and
that's it. Yeah, I thought it was envy. Yeah, envy and enmity. But yeah, the envy part I found interesting, because I've noticed for myself, like for example, I had one friend and I sort of think of her as a friend, but then I would always sense that there was a jealousy there. And I noticed that because of that, I couldn't fully trust her, because I felt like she wasn't fully invested in me doing well. So it was okay so long as I stayed kind of the same as her or something, or like a bit less. But if I was thriving, there was a jealousy. And then I thought, well, does that mean they don't want me to thrive then? So then I couldn't fully trust. And I realized at that time how harmful to trust it can be when we have jealousies, as opposed to having, you know, mudita, like rejoicing in other people's success and goodness, and even maybe spiritual spiritual insight. So many people, even among the Sangha, can get envious or can be resentful and say, that person, they can't be enlightened, you know, which is very sad, actually, you know, because maybe they are, maybe they're not, but maybe they are. And I don't know if anybody has struggles with that. I think it's something probably we all feel from time to time, envy, and I don't know. Grace and Annette are smiling so much. Do you want to say anything? It'd be lovely to hear you. They're so sweet together. My goodness. Shirley. Come to Shirley. It doesn't have to be on that, but I'm just inviting it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because they're not the sort of emotions that would spring to mind when you think of conflict and hatred arising. But they're quite sort of, I've been sort of, as you were saying, I was sort of thinking about it, and I was thinking, do I really agree with this? And then I said, this envy and miserliness, that it's a sort of a subtle mean-mindedness. Which that's very interesting. I just sort of think this subtle mean-mindedness that we don't like to, you know, we acknowledge it if we sort of, I mean, have a big row with somebody because we have a difference of opinion. And I think, you know, having different opinions about things, you know, like your dad not liking Donald Trump, that's very, very obvious, and it's sort of in your face. But I'm just, you know, just a little reflection, this sort of very subtle mean-mindedness. We don't often, well, I don't, you know, I don't sort of really reflect on that because it is sort of, it is sort of very subtle. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I like that idea of subtle mean-mindedness because it sort of suggests that we just, like I said with this friend example, they were kind to a point, but it's like not giving your heart fully, isn't it? It's not giving all your goodwill. It's holding a bit back. Yeah.
To me, it seems to also be rooted in a sense of inner poverty. It's like I haven't got enough to be able to really give to that. You know, of course we all have, but the perception of not having enough here. And I wish that I had what they have, or I can't share what I have with them because I don't have enough. There's a sort of a sense of inner poverty that I hear when I hear those two.
That's true, isn't it? Yeah.
And the sense of self is always prone to a bit of poverty because it's never quite.
That's true.
Yeah, that's just it's
intrinsically.
The inner self is impoverished.
Yes, because it never quite can make itself.
Yeah, because I mean, some people come to the spiritual path thinking they'll improve and even perfect themselves. They use this word like perfect themselves. There is no self you can perfect. I mean, it is inherently conditioned, unreliable, suffering, etc., etc. So yeah, in that sense, it's bound to be flawed and incapable of bringing happiness. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, that's the thing with this, isn't it? I guess that closeness is a state of sense of self, like I need it, not them, kind of separateness, exactly. Closeness,
misunderstanding.
Yeah. So I see that our two beaming ladies in the dark had their hand up. Would you like to speak, Grace or Annette, or both?
Can unmute, please?
Hey.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, you kind of said what I was gonna say too, but yeah, I've been noticing that jealousy and envy arise with like people that are really similar to me, and it feels like this, like we have all the same conditionings, and so like so many conditionings are overlapping that it's like the sort of primal survivalist fear instinct comes in of like not enough room for both of us and not enough for both of us. So we're both aiming at the same goals, then we can't both get the same goals. So like the survive or the competition comes in of like this like I gotta win, you can't win, or something like
That is so interesting and perceptive, because it makes me, I relate to, like, if it's somebody who's so different from you, it's like, well, they're different, so it doesn't matter, right? It's not like there's a sort of ground where comparison even makes sense. And it also makes sense in the sense of where you see the conflict in the world. It's between two leaders, usually two white men, actually. Sorry, but it's true, because most of them are white men, you know, at least in white-based countries. But you know, it's when we're people of a similar age, wanting the similar things, and then there's a competition there. It's very interesting. So when that comes up, then you're aware of that at the time. How are you aware? How does it affect you?
I noticed this sort of like holding on to like the deepest things that I identify as me are at question and at stake. And so I noticed like, oh, but I'm smart, and like, oh, but I'm whatever it is, you know. And it's like I see that, and then it feels really painful.
Well, it's great that you can feel that it's dukkha, because I think sometimes we don't know and we're just trapped in these things, right? And it's kind of considered sort of normal in the world. It's like, how competitive are you? You know, are you going to push forward in your job? You need to be aggressive and competitive. Thank you very much. Could I just come to the chat actually to answer from a few people who haven't spoken yet, and then we'll come to Mukund. Thanks for sharing, Grace. Thank you very much. I always love your insights. How about liking something wholesome such as Dhamma? Does it lead to dispute? I would say no. Well, not really. I mean, I guess there can be some instances where if it turns into craving or kind of wanting even wholesome feelings to last, it can lead to sort of conflict within, especially if it gets into like, oh, I want that peaceful state that I used to have, and that can lead to a kind of inner conflict. It can come up, of course, even with, they're a better meditator than me, you know. But if it's really kind of liking, as in inclining and being inspired by something wholesome, I don't think it leads to dispute. I think it leads out of it. I think we don't need to be afraid of that, because, you know, sometimes in the Dhamma we can look and say, oh dear, be careful not to get attached to this wholesome state. But nobody ever says, oh, be careful not to get attached to sex, or not to get attached to like indulgence. So why do we have to have all these warnings on meditation? I mean, obviously we have to approach it in a wholesome and in a ethical way. But generally speaking, the Dhamma is leading you out of dispute. That's kind of one of the attributes of Dhamma, to make peace, to kind of settle the conflict externally as well as internally, I would say. Do you want to do the next one?
Okay. Machi.
Yeah.
From my observation, this elaboration of perception and notions is stronger when there is no contact or proximity with another person.
Stronger.
If they are not near, it is much easier to fabricate worst versions of their intentions in your mind. Oh dear. I think it is good to constantly check your thoughts about other persons by asking them. Yeah.
100%.
Right.
Communication.
That's true.
Absolutely.
But sometimes we are scared to ask because we don't know. They might say something that we don't like.
I think it's for me, I'm far more insecure and scared about silence. I like to talk. That is my safe zone. Silence and areas where people might be thinking something and they're not coming to you to ask is really danger zone for me. So I really agree actually that it's great to check our thoughts and ask them, and ask in a way that's very open. Sort of, oh, did you feel, not kind of, did you have this mean thought about me? Not that, but how are you feeling, you know, when you said such and such? Was there something happening there for you? Or I don't know. Ask in a skillful way. And basically asking gives them the sense that there's room for them to be heard. There's room for them to be heard, I think, is the most important thing. You know, you're not just landing on a fixed perception, because for me personally that feels so uncomfortable when I'm in a box and there's nothing I can do to get out of it, and I have to kind of, oh no, but I didn't mean it that way.
But sometimes you just have to accept that people have maybe some wrong view, but you look at yourself and go, well, did I mean anything by it? Did I mean anything by it? And sometimes you do, you know, sometimes you do, which is why you feel a bit out yourself.
Yeah, you feel a bit off
because you yourself,
you know that there was something a bit.
Yes. And you yourself have done something that, you know, you feel not quite so good about.
Right, when it's something you've done, but there can be times when there isn't any feeling of being off, but the other person still might misunderstand. And I just think we can do a certain amount of work on our own, but in the case of social and communal harmony, in the case of harmony between people in relationships, I don't think it's enough. I think it's, I don't know. What do you think, Aya? Both, I guess, but
I was thinking, actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking about intention, which is obviously so important. So if you know that your intention was not to cause harm, it wasn't, you know, it's been that your intention has been misperceived, you know, that you can rest in that inside. You don't have to feel, oh my gosh, they think that, and that. There can be a certain resting in that, and then you can still do the repair as best you can on the outside. But I think there is a certain taking refuge in one's intention. And then also, and often nowadays they're speaking about intention versus impact. So then you have to see, well, what was the impact?
Right.
And maybe one has something to learn from it, or
because I think yes, refuge in one's intention, but I just don't think it's enough.
It's a basis from which to meet the other, because if you're you're sort of off center and feeling, oh gosh, they think this about me, and then it becomes all about oneself again, you know, rather than if you know, like, oh, actually no, I did, that was at all what I intended, and they're obviously suffering because of some mistake that I've made, or misperception. Then you can actually meet them rather than
that's true. If it leads to that step, I agree. I think the thing for me is, I've heard it said before, oh, I checked my intention and that was the end of it. And it just feels like it can be a bypassing of having to then do the reparation, or then take care about the impact, because intention alone isn't quite enough. Like, I think a deeper sensitivity can come when we actually learn about triggers for others, and we can't stop them being triggered, and it's not necessarily advisable to, because we have to work with what we have. But I mean, one of the reasons I always do a check-in here is to just know how people are doing, and some people might be feeling tired, or might be feeling this way or that way. So I might not have a bad intention, but maybe I could have a better one to look after them, or do you know what I mean? I think in terms of harmony, it's not enough to just sit back and say, well, I didn't mean anything, it's their problem. That could be the danger there only. But I get the point of having to find that ease within first before moving out. Definitely. It's interesting, this person saying about it's easy to fabricate when they're not there. I really think that's true, because again, it's getting further and further away from direct experience, isn't it? It's becoming memory, and you know, we remember the things that maybe trigger us, or that's the way the mind's primed to look for alert signals, dangers, whatever. Hey, we're here from Susie now. These are all our recent guests. Hey.
So, Susie, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Hello, Venerables.
Hello.
So lovely to see you all, and nice to see all the guests that I've also met. Veronica and Annette and Gracia. Hi. I just wanted to quickly reflect on how important the communication was in situations like that. I have a very close friend of mine. She's probably one of my closest friends, and we have situations many times when this kind of I won't even say competition, but some sort of envy situations, partly also because we are very similar, and that is a thing. And we've just developed a very honest and clear communication system. So we both reflect on ourselves and we share it with each other. So we would ask, when you said that, I thought it meant this. Did it really mean that or not? And 99%, I mean, I can't even think of actually one occasion when it was true. All this, you know, so it always turns out that, oh, that was really not what I thought it was. All right. And I don't know, it's just such a wholesome thing, because communication is very important.
It must create a lot of trust. Good statistic, exactly. To undermine your own thoughts and then to create a lot of trust together.
A lot of learning from each other, definitely. Yeah, I mean, from my side at least. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's very non-threatening, isn't it, when you approach that way? It's very non-threatening for the other, you know, this is what I thought. You're being vulnerable, actually, which is, I think, why it creates the trust.
Yes, definitely.
It's wonderful. We should have that as a little in the core what? There's such a thing in the monastery rule. If in doubt, try this. Try this little perception. Go meditate with some metta and then approach. Yeah, lovely. Good. I mean, we don't always do it right. I mean, just to say that we can have these things, like these ideals, we don't always do it right. And we have to accept that too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I buy into my thoughts too often. Especially when they're triggered, you know, when the thought goes along with a feeling that's very intense, you know, it's like that time it really seems to have some ground. Yeah, great statistic. Wonderful. Thank you. Shall we read it out? I guess you're a bit far away, or yeah, I'll read it and maybe you could comment. Oh, what was the earlier one? Using that inner refuge so that you're making reparations out of care and compassion for the other person instead of trying to make amends so you can feel better in a way that's based on self-view and a desire to be liked. That is absolutely what we were saying in a very concise and articulate way. Fantastic summary. Very nice. We should keep this chat box. I wonder if one of our co-hosts can copy paste this chat box so that we can learn later from it. Okay, so I'll read Leona's question out and maybe Nanda Bodhi can reflect. Actually, we only have about 2 minutes now. So I guess this is the last comment for today. I reckon we could make this a double session. We all have things to do. All right, I find that sometimes conversations, asking the other about what they meant or explaining what I meant, can also complicate a situation, and create new fabrications about what's happening. Yeah, it can be endless. The other person and myself. Sometimes I find it's better to refer to something that connects us and let the other problem go. Yeah, wonderful.
That's good. Yeah, so something I've had to learn to, you know, zip up from time to time, because there can be a tendency to want to clarify and you know, make sure the person really understands, you know, and sometimes it's better just to let it go. Yeah, and that's just discernment, isn't it? And there are things that really do need to be taken care of and attended to, and there are things that can just be let go.
Yeah,
and it's okay.
Yeah,
and I like that emphasis on putting energy into something that will connect you, rather than trying to sort out what was going on here. It's lovely.
That's beautiful. That's watering the flowers, isn't it? Yeah, it's beautiful. And from the perspective of being in a monastery, it can be way too much to talk through every little thing. My goodness, you've just come from doing like a massive newsletter, 7 hours online, and then yikes, you just want to have a little bit of everyone caring for one another. And yeah, but I think the times to do it, for me anyway, can be if you see a certain pattern that's kind of stuck and then it's happening again and again, and it's kind of like there's more suffering being made by leaving it than by just approaching it. But then finding the right time, the right way, asking the other, is it a good time, is very important, I think. You know, following those 5 guidelines the Buddha said, that it should be the right time, should be beneficial, should be true, should be done gently and with metta. Gently and with metta. So yeah, but I love that. Connecting us. Yeah, because problems are endless.
Problems are endless.
And there's an endless capacity for goodness and love and care and all kinds of ways we can look after one another. And I think there's never too much of it, you know. This is one thing some people say you can have too much metta. I just totally disagree. If it's really metta, right? If it's really a real thing, can't have enough. All right, so I think it's time to close, and I wonder if Manoi's going to say a few words.
Happy Vesak.
Oh yes, happy Vesak. Well, it's
Vesak.
one of the Vesaks. There's many Vesaks this year, and next in June there's the big Vesak that we're celebrating in our community anyway. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know if we're going to do anything particularly special, but if anyone wants to come here that day, I guess you can. That'd be the easiest for us. Just tell the group and see who turns up. We talk about the Bodhini's qualities that we all have in latent form. All right. So thank you all. We'll say a bit more afterwards, because actually we just opened up a lot of very, very wonderful events for you to book up into quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, if I talk a little bit, I'll like to start talking about the events. The events page has everything, but then I want to highlight there is a retreat by both Venerable Supeka and Canda called Wisdom and Forgiveness. And then also the latest Ajahn Brahm's tour details are there. You would have seen in the latest newsletter, and also it is in the website now. And as you know, today's Sutta discussion is offered on a donation basis in the spirit of generosity. And you can use the buttons in the website to donate. Any donation that you've given, any contribution that you're able to make is gratefully received, and it will be used for the upkeep of the vihara and day-to-day running of the vihara, and also the development of England's first monastery, where women can train towards full bhikkhuni ordination. I love that part. Every day. And I'm now going to paste a link of the donation thing. And if you are able to serve in any other ways, help to get involved in any other ways of the project and the vihara, please contact team at anukampaproject.org. There's a dana you can do, that is the food donations. You can visit physically and give, or you can arrange a remote dana, or you can do things like the supermarket deliveries. And there are a couple of groups as well to get involved in different things. So please contact team at anukampaproject.org and explain your specialty and the times and the reliability and all. So we need good, reliable volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you mind just popping the email address in there in the chat for anyone who's new? And yeah, just to reiterate really that the retreat that Venerable Pekka and I are teaching is on June the 17th. It's in Cambridge. It's a one-day retreat. So I'm sorry, Grace, you'll have to stay longer just for that. Just kidding. But she's extended her stay since February, basically. extend, which is great. And then Ajahn Brahm's tour is happening in November. Ajahn Brahmali is coming in like less than a week. So it's just too much. It's so much. And I heard from a couple of people that you weren't able to get tickets for Ajahn Brahmali through the systems we have. Just turn up at this stage. Just turn up. You can, you know, give whatever funds are needed on the door. There's loads of space in all the talks. So we really would love to see you. And a big piece of the project that has to shift from myself to the group is organizing these tours, because it's too much. Now I'm running a monastery. And I have said it before, it's not that you don't know, it's just that we need people who are really committed. And I know that there's a few people here like Sean and maybe Grace who can help going forward, and I know, you know, we have to talk about it in more detail, which we will do in due course. I just actually am quite hoarse at the moment and haven't got any time outside of all these event organizings. So, but we will talk about it, and we want to put together a really great retreat organization team not just so we can bring Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Brahmali, but so I can also teach more retreats in England, because what's happening is I'm getting a lot of invitations to teach retreats overseas. And because they organize it, I say yes, but really I'd love to do more here so that I can build a local or at least a national support base here. And I think, you know, yeah, England's pretty lovely in springtime, and it would be just nice to give people from this community more opportunities. So we do need people to make those things happen. So if you have particular skills and significant amounts of time, or at least enough to make it worth contributing to a team effort, that would be great. And in the long run, we're looking to expand our trust team as well. And also, I don't know, I think it's an idea to have a membership kind of thing, but we'll need help changing the constitution for that. So big ideas. But I was told recently, I think by Benori, and a lovely group of people who came recently, that this is actually a very positive time in a project. It's not that things are going wrong, which I thought it was. It's actually a sign of needing to grow. It's like a bud waiting to burst, and it needs to have a new structure that's much more solid, because we're not a small thing anymore. So we actually have more funds in the bank ready for when I have more people living here, and we can get a bigger place when we have more structures in place. So that's what's needed now. All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and from all over the world. I know there's someone from Australia, someone from India, like people from America. There's people from all over the place. Annette and Grace are in Berlin, Ruth Annette, and yes, it's just wonderful. Susie in Wales, I know she's studying, and Swansea, but you finished, right? So well done. And Bill's in America. Anyway, metta to you all.